4th. I'm your host, Kimberly Perot, and welcome to Wasatch Weekends. On today's show, Ross had a conversation earlier in the week with a female Air Force veteran about women in the military and how we can best support them. Plus, it is Books for Ukraine. What does that entail? Julio had that conversation, and all of that is happening. But before we get started, I know you want to check out the weather, so let's take a look. Conversation about Books for Ukraine and what that entails. It's so important that we are continuing to share literary privileges all around the world. Let's take a look.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. Now our next guest is here to share with us an amazing initiative that is bringing children's books to children and families displaced by the conflict in Ukraine. To give us all the details, we have Hans van de Weert from the International Rescue Committee joining us this morning. Hans, thank you so much for being here with us today. How are you doing?
I am very fine. Thank you for asking. It's a pleasure to be here.
I appreciate you setting aside some time to speak with us here today about this initiative that, like I said, is bringing children's books to families and children displaced by the conflict in Ukraine. Before we talk about that, Hans, I would like if you could just give us a brief overview of what the International Rescue Committee does. I know this is a collaborative effort, but I would like to hear, a little bit about your work and specifically with the International Rescue Committee.
Yes, Julio, the International Rescue Committee is an international humanitarian agency that works in conflicts around the world where we provide humanitarian assistance to people that need it, but that also has offices here in the United States to welcome newcomers, refugees, asylum seekers, and other groups. In Ukraine, where the conflict is really taking its toll,
yes.
Where we now see more than 14 million people in need of humanitarian assistance, 3 million of which are children, and where 10 million people have been displaced because of the violence, we provide urgent humanitarian assistance as well. We provide cash to people. We support medical facilities. We try to create safe and healing spaces for children, but in a country that is destroyed by the war, where the economy isn't functioning at all, and where there's not enough humanitarian assistance, that work is very challenging, as you can imagine.
Absolutely, Hans, and I appreciate the work that you guys are doing, especially in times like this when we have a crisis in Ukraine, as you mentioned. Now, you kind of touched on it briefly, but can you give us maybe a little bit more details on the current situation in Ukraine, especially for families that are being affected over there?
Yeah, the current situation in Ukraine still means that there is bombing taking place almost every day, that bombing targets communities where people live. To give you an example, 40% of the school buildings in Ukraine is being destroyed. The roads are being targeted so that people cannot move freely, but that then also means that essential goods cannot reach a community. So in the markets, a lot of essential items are very hard to get. So the situation for people in Ukraine is really dire, and unfortunately hasn't been improving at all.
Wow, yeah. Now, Hans, I would like to talk a little bit about this initiative, Books for Ukraine. I know it's, like I mentioned before, a collaborative effort between a few different agencies. So tell me about how you ended up coming together with HarperCollins Children's Books, the Creative Artists Agency, and Endless OS Foundation to help the children being affected in Ukraine.
Well, what all of these organizations shared in common with our organization is that they were deeply concerned about the impact of conflict on children's lives, on children's emotional well-being, on their ability to go to school and to learn. And so each of these agencies, from their own perspective and expertise, brainstormed about what can we do to do something about this situation. And that is how the idea was born, to basically translate the books of New York Times bestselling authors' children's book, translate them in the Ukrainian language, and then to make them available to Ukrainian children that were being displaced. And the impact of the project has been quite phenomenal.
I actually wanted to ask you about that next, because I know that you all have already started, distributing some of these books for Ukrainian children living in London, for example. Tell us maybe a little bit about what some of those reactions have been from the children or from the family who have been receiving these books, and maybe how they have helped the children.
Yeah, to see the kids receive the books and then to see how they reacted to the books, it has been pretty amazing. Some children basically just quietly took the book, went into a corner and started reading, I think indicating that they really missed doing that.
Yeah.
Other kids were so enthusiastic about receiving the book that they wanted to share the title with other kids or with their teacher or with their parent. And then parents and teachers, of course, have been really delighted by this initiative, because it basically brought education materials, to their kids, and it allowed them to read in their own language, for the first time in a long time. One out of two children in Ukraine at the moment is not able to go to school, and also of the children that are outside of Ukraine, many have difficulties accessing the education system or accessing education materials in their own language. And that is where this project really, tries to make a difference.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I can only imagine the power of receiving a book that is in your language that you are finally able to read after, as you mentioned, your education being disrupted. Being able to read in your language, I can only imagine how those reactions were for the children and for the families. Now, Hans, I'd like to ask you as well, how can people at home help families like these who have been affected by the conflict in Ukraine, or where can we go to learn more?
So to answer your last question first, right, I think go to the website www.rescue.org/books for Ukraine. I think there you can read everything about this project and how people can help. But secondly, I would say, this work of international humanitarian assistance, whether it's in Ukraine or in other countries in the world, the work of resettling newcomers in the United States needs a lot of funding. And so if people want to donate, that is another way that people can engage. And then lastly, because we have a network of 29 offices in the United States, including in Utah and Colorado, it really is also great if people can volunteer and can actually, directly contribute to the support to newly arrived families. So I would say there are many ways that people can engage, each in their own way and within their own means.
Hans, thank you so much for being with us this morning and sharing a little bit about this wonderful initiative, Books for Ukraine. It was lovely to talk to you and learn a little bit about all the work that you guys are doing to bring a little bit of joy and happiness to children and families affected by the conflict in Ukraine. Thank you once again for joining us.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure.
For everyone watching at home, stay tuned. We'll be right back with more of the show after this break.
I certainly support and appreciate our U.S. military and the fact that they are so inclusive in all different ways. We had a conversation earlier in the week with an Air Force veteran about mental health for females in specific, and also how to protect against sexual violence in the military. Let's take a look at that conversation.
One of the reasons we get to love where we live and enjoy the outdoors here is because of our service members in the military. And joining us this morning is Naomi Mathis, an Air Force veteran, and also with the Disabled American Veterans nonprofit. Naomi, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you so much for having me. Good morning.
How are you?
Fantastic.
Awesome, awesome. Well, I know you're very busy, so thanks for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit about this survey that just came out from the nonprofit that you're with about kind of the legislations that's working its way through DC?
Sure. DAV's new report, Women Veterans, The Journey to Mental Wellness, is a comprehensive look at the risk factors contributing to the staggering suicide rate among women veterans and how the VA can do better. It identifies gaps in care and offers more than 50 legislative and policy recommendations that can be implemented to save women veterans' lives.
Awesome, awesome. And how has the role of women in the military changed over the years, and what's kind of the scale of how many women are in our service?
Sure. So women are the fastest growing demographic of veterans, with over 650,000 women veterans that utilize the VA. And there's about 900,000 that are even enrolled in VA. And they're also the fastest growing demographic in the military.
Wow, wow. And unfortunately, we hear a lot about suicide in the military. What's the role of help and support for women in the military specifically?
Well, they are looking at ways to move the needle down, in the military as well. But you have to remember that those folks that are in the military are then going to become veterans, and they're going to join the ranks of veterans. And so we have to ensure that VA is able to handle the amount of women that are coming in and really able to meet their needs, their unique needs. They have some unique risk factors when it comes to suicide.
Yeah, and what are some of those unique needs?
From our research, we found that certain factors put women veterans at high risk for suicide, such as military sexual trauma, which is inclusive of sexual harassment and sexual assault while serving in the military. And it's not just military sexual trauma, it also includes things like intimate partner violence, substance use disorder, and mental health issues related to reproductive health. And now when you layer all of that along with combat related PTSD, in some instances, you really do have the perfect storm.
Wow, okay. And the DAV is doing so much over there. What are some policy recommendations that you guys have?
So overall, we did find gaps in care. We found gaps in access, training for the community care providers, and suicide prevention efforts, and even gender-tailored care. So one of the gaps that we found was VA's innovative predictive model that helps to predict suicidality in veterans and identify and intervene with those high-risk veterans. It uses a male normative baseline, and it does not include military sexual trauma. So we recommend that VA ensure that women veterans issues unique factors are weighted in their algorithm, and that it does include military sexual trauma. In fact, we believe that military sexual trauma should be the central pillar of all of their suicide prevention efforts.
Yeah, amazing. And which ones can kind of be implemented sooner rather than later to help female veterans that might be at risk of suicide?
So one of the things that we recommend is a 3-digit hotline for the National Domestic Hotline. 1 in 5 women report being exposed to intimate partner violence. So one of 5 women veterans report being exposed to intimate partner violence. And so we believe that a 3-digit number will help them to remember if they are in a period of crisis and dealing with domestic violence.
Yeah, 3-digit phone number sounds very, makes a lot of sense to make that a lot easier. And then, excuse me, sorry. What other resources are available for women or any kind of veterans that might be feeling or thinking about suicide, what else is out there, or if anyone knows a veteran, what resources are there?
So if they want to view the full report, if they want to look at all of the 50 policy recommendations, they can go to womenveterans.org. Now on that site, there's also some resources, some tools that are available to them. But if they are in crisis, in a period of crisis and dealing with suicide ideations, or you know a veteran that is, then you must dial 988 and press 1 for the veterans option to reach the suicide crisis hotline.
Okay, amazing, amazing. And then how can people support the DAV, or just anyone that wants to kind of help you guys out or support the cause? What can people do to help?
If you want to join us in the fight, they can go to womenveterans.org, and that will lead them to our website, dav.org, and they can help join us in the fight, and we would love to partner.
Awesome. Well, Naomi, thanks so much for joining us and all the hard work you're doing and important work you're doing. Again, nothing we do happens without our military, so we really thank you. And definitely check out the DAV for more information and resources for help.
All right, thanks for joining us. So after 4 years with the University of Utah men's basketball program, center Brandon Carlson is gearing up for his last season as a Ute. His performance in the 2023-24 season could determine his future. 7-footer of Utah men's basketball, Brandon Carlson is the poster child for hard work pays off. He's improved every season since joining the program in 2019.
You know, he used to be really a quieter guy, and now you walk in that gym and he owns the gym. Like, he has a big-time voice, elite communication on and off the floor, and he knows exactly what is expected. He understands this league inside out and backwards, you know, going into his 5th year.
The All-Pac-12 first-team selection from South Jordan, Utah, wants to turn pro next year. Not every collegiate basketball player is cut out to play in the NBA. However, Carlson knows what he needs to improve on for a chance.
A lot of them are talking with me saying I'm playing more, for offensively and defensively. In order to do that, I have to be able to guard in space, and so that's something I've been really focusing on over the summer, and feel like I've really developed, some good habits with that.
In the NBA, big men are required to change their coverage on defense to guards as well, which isn't traditional. Teammate of Carlson's, Raleigh Worcester, says he's seen the 7-footer improve in that area.
I think we've all noticed a big difference in how he can guard guards and switch onto quicker athletic guards and really be able to stay in front and contest jumpers.
If Carlson can keep improving steadily, we could be hearing his name called in the 2024 NBA draft. University of Utah men's basketball program plays some tough games this season, so it'll be interesting to see how Carlson performs in those matchups. Stick with us. We'll be right back.
We certainly started this week off strong with this Monday morning edition of Wasatch Weekends. I'm your host, Kimberly Pro, and thanks for joining. We talked all things mental health within the military and then books for Ukraine. Really interesting stuff here, so I'm glad you were able to join us. Enjoy your week, and we'll see you next time.